Welcome to Astro Chat with Anne Sundell, Kimberly Williams, and Monica Anna. We are three professional astrologers living in three separate countries, coming together every new and full moon to share our 3 points of view on astrology. Whether you enjoy deep dives into the current transits or you are just beginning to learn about astrology for the first time, there is a place for you here. All that is required is an appreciation for astrology, along with a respect for the various traditions within it. So grab a mug of coffee, your favorite cup of tea, or any other beverage of your choice, and join us for a chat on the astrology of the next 2 weeks. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another Astro Chat. You are joined by myself, Kimberly Williams, and my wonderful friends and amazing astrologers, Monica Anna and Anne Sundell. Before we jump in, I just want to put out a big shout out thank you to all of our followers and viewers. Our last video on the eclipse had over 500 views within the first few days. We were so thrilled and excited. So thank you very much for following, for joining, for listening, and for sharing in the comments. We currently now have been on YouTube long enough and gained enough followers that if you haven't noticed, our lovely handle that was eons long has been shortened, and you can let your friends know that they can find us at YouTube/astrochatpodcast.com. Yay! So thank you. Thank you. Today, we're going to jump into talking about the next eclipse, right? Because, of course, they're happening in pairs. We're looking here at the eclipse that's going to be at 16 degrees of Taurus, and this is on November 8th. Here in the central time zone of the United States, we'll be having it at 6 a.m. Over in England, 11 a.m., and in Finland, 1 p.m. So convert that to your time, wherever you're tuning in from. I think that's all we need to say to start off with. But before we kind of look at the chart, Monica's going to take it away and talk about full moon energy, especially in Taurus.
Yeah, as a resident moon in Taurus, I've been nominated by my friends to actually talk about it, which I love talking about Taurus because I do think that the earth signs are a little bit misunderstood. And they are considered very grounded, very practical, very down to earth, which they absolutely are. But sometimes that is said in a context of them not being spiritual or not being as connected to the spirit onto that realm as maybe other, signs, the fire signs or the water signs. And for me, every element connects to the spirit in their own way. The way Taurus, for example, connects to the spirit is through nature. Taurus doesn't just look at a garden and see all the beautiful flowers and the trees. Taurus sees that Garden of Eden, that beauty there that thrives because it's embodied and ensouled. So this is one of the aspects of Taurus, that kind of higher aspects of Taurus, when we look at the world around us and everything that surrounds us, and we can see that it is a divine creation and everything is imbued with consciousness. And we have now a full moon in Taurus. So what does that mean? Full moon is usually very high energy. On top of that, we have eclipse, which we'll talk about in a minute. But full moon is usually really high electric energy. And the luminaries are in opposition to one another. So the Taurian qualities, Taurian themes and archetypes are standing in direct opposition to Scorpio themes. And full moon, it's a time of fullness. We came to that peak of a cycle and we can express our gratitude and we can celebrate in the light of the moon everything that we achieve in terms of those themes, in terms of what is our worth, are we safe and secure? Do we enjoy the world around us? literally and metaphorically. So do we actually enjoy our own environment? Do we have a bit of a garden that we might like? Do we have a beautiful park that we love to go? Do we enjoy the world around us that surrounds us? Do we feel comfortable in that? And does it nurture us? It's a moon, so it's still that kind of the quality of, does it nurture our souls? In the light of the full moon, we can also see the shadow side of the sign. So that kind of pull between Taurus and Scorpio is, well, do we feel safe and secure, or do we lock ourselves out in that environment because we're afraid of something else? Because that fear of leaving what we know is too much to bear. The themes around full moon in Taurus can bring the themes around finances and the security around that. And again, that power struggle between Taurus and Scorpio. Am I secure in my finances? Am I secure in the worth that I have? Or is there some kind of underlying fear of the current situation in the world, of the assets that I have that maybe, you know, I share with someone else? Is there something going on underneath? Full moon can bring a lot of anxiety and stress and nerves around those topics, only if we don't consciously work with that. So this is another thing I'd like to address at the full moon. Yes, full moon can make us a little bit, you know, not quite there with that energy, but I found it that usually it happens is when we don't work with that energy consciously, it just comes up and hits us. If we do work with it, if we are afraid, you know, aware of our fears and responsibilities and that groundness that we need, and we work with that, then there's nothing to worry about. We can celebrate at the full moon rather than face the stuff that are in a closet. So that's actually a good, I think, good metaphor for the full moon. It's stuff that coming out of the closet into the daylight, into the light of the moon, maybe not necessarily daylight, into the light of the moon. And we just have to deal with that. And going, you know, straight away into eclipse, that closet might have quite a lot of skeletons. So are we having a Halloween party and they're coming out? Or it's more like, you know, Walking Dead movie when we need to run away. Not a great metaphors today, but hey, we're in the midst of the eclipse. This is what's coming up for me.
I think that is a great metaphor. I love that. Love that. I think too that with Taurus energy, there's something very Taurus. There's a reason that Earth Day was placed in the middle of the sun moving through Taurus. You know, the Taurus energy embodies, and it embodies the earth, like you were saying, getting out in nature, getting out and seeing the world, but it's also our body. And when the moon is in Taurus, every month, these are times when I feel very connected to my body, to what's going on, to the senses of what do I see, what do I hear, what do I taste, what do I feel, which to me is kind of the mode in which Taurus moves through the world. It isn't so much about the things or the materialism, it is about the pleasure from things and how I value things. And value is another big word that I tend to associate with Taurus. We spend our money on things because we value them. We have people, we gather, we congregate because we value or we feel valued. So another thing I'm looking at, and we'll talk about this a lot more, I think, when we get into the eclipses, is what is going on with where I feel valued, and especially that shadow side of where do I not feel valued? Where do I feel maybe devalued? And those buttons, maybe things that get pushed a bit too often. Going back to the trick or treaters, you know, are you getting the trick or are you getting the treat when that doorbell rings? We'll see.
Another thing I think about with Taurus is keeping or collecting, the having the security by keeping the status quo. I don't want to change. I don't want to let go. I don't want to give up. And it can be, I mean, it can be materialistic, it can be emotional, it people. This is my person. I'm going to keep to this one. I mean, the status quo and the changing, and Scorpio South Node right now urging us to a bit more let go and look at those skeletons. It's a great metaphor for Scorpio, I think. And then just what can we let go of, and what do we need to let go of? Also with Taurus as being a sign that really can enjoy the five senses and know that how can I feel, how can I be in this physical place and really be grounded here, and not go way into the chaos, into the emotional turmoil that Scorpio might also be tempting to do, the South Node there. So to keep the positive side of being grounded and keeping the status quo in a time where there's very rocky. So there I think Taurus is very good at doing this thing. Now there's like good and bad things with that too.
I think it's like this with every archetype in every energy. It can manifest in a positive or negative, in destructive mode or in that building productive mode. And I have to say, I love that you brought that, keeping something or holding on to something, because again, talking about positive or negative aspect of that holding on to, very Taurian thing is that security blanket that we give to children. They carry that with them, that little piece of cloth. They carry that with them everywhere, including to go to sleep, because it means something to them. They value that little piece of cloth, and it makes them feel safe and secure and contained. On the other hand, if we don't understand what that blanket represents and we can't integrate that internally, we will carry that through life, trying to accumulate things and becoming a hoarders, trying to keep things to make us safe, to hold on to memories, to hold on to, sentimental things. And at some point that can become a bit too much and overwhelming, because we keep to that instead of actually understanding what that energy means and how to integrate it within us. So thank you for bringing that up. That was good.
And earlier, Anne, you were sharing with us the Sabian symbol associated with the 16 degrees of Taurus. Do you want to share that with everybody?
Yeah, I was just going for that one because it also highlights the same themes that we have been talking about this far, I think. A symbolical battle between swords and torches is this Sabian symbol. And it's the keynote for it is refusing to depend upon the past. The seeker turns warrior, fighting anew the eternal great war. So Taurus and Scorpio, and where do we see the new path, and where do we keep to the old patterns, and what should we leave behind, and what is the new spiritual war ahead?
It does remind me of the tarot deck, doesn't it? It's the sword and the torches being the wands.
Yeah.
And very much the idea of the thought realm versus the spiritual or inspired realm. And how do we navigate between two of those? How do they clash in our lives? What is it that your head tells you that is right and that is wrong and that you've been told, and those thought patterns that you have that you use to judge the world? And what is that spiritual spark that guides you, that lights you up, that brings that fire within you and within your soul? And are they aligned, or are they in a battle? For a lot of us, they're probably battling, either, on a small scale or on a bigger scale. And the idea of, the rational mind can tell me that this is the right path for me, and this is the right university, and this is the right job, and this is the right person. And then I'm looking into my soul, and it's like, oh my God, this lights me up, and this course, sets me on fire, and this person really gets me going. What is it, and how do we choose? And it's interesting that it is, at this degree that we actually have an eclipse, with some other aspects that we're going into it. I think we can start now. I think Kimberly was you that was taking us into the eclipse energy.
Yeah. We can definitely move into that. So the first thing to think about is the fact that it's a lunar eclipse. We talked 2 weeks ago, we talked about the Scorpio eclipse was solar. So this one is lunar, and the mechanics of a lunar means that the moon is being eclipsed. The moon is moving into the Earth's shadow and doesn't get all that sunlight to reflect back. But what from an astrology point of view, what this can often mean is often the lunar eclipse is very internalized. It's something that, whereas the solar eclipse is something that's happening outside of myself, in my world, actions I need to take out there. The lunar eclipse can often feel like, what is happening on a inner level? What am I processing? How am I reacting to that eclipse energy and all the change and everything that's been stirring these last 2 weeks? There's certainly more we can say, but that's kind of that vibe, that feeling. And with any particular eclipse, as we've mentioned, you're going to find that this pair of signs, that axis of signs, repeats about every 8 years, give or take. But to the degree that it's at, it will be more like an 18-year cycle. And fortunately, Monica was kind enough to look it up earlier. So back in 2003, November of 2003, was the last time we saw an eclipse that was close to this 16 degrees of Taurus. And this lovely eclipse cycle that we're in right now, it started last year around the holidays. Thanksgiving, Christmas time last year began our Taurus Scorpio cycle that we're in the middle of. It actually won't end until next year. We're going to have next year some Aries and Libra energy come in, but it's not gone yet, right? We will see that in October 28th of 2023 will be our last and final eclipse of this cycle in Taurus. So these dates might really tie into either what is going on in your world right now or what you're feeling about your world right now. What do you guys want to throw in there about eclipses?
I was actually chatting to a group of ladies recently, and one thing that we were talking about is eclipses are more common than people think, because we're always making a huge deal. But we always have eclipses, like every year, astrologically speaking, there is an eclipse, right? And we go through those cycles, and something to bear in mind that they talk about changes and shifting energies on a global level for me, but they not necessarily have to mean that there are huge changes in your world, that suddenly you'll move out of the house or move across the ocean or break down, with your partner. The eclipses usually are super strong if they are close to the sign of your own nodes. So if you have your own nodal axis in the same sign, it means that your nodal axis has either return or opposition, and those eclipses will be super strong. If the eclipses touch a sensitive point in your chart, so on the 8th of November, we have this Taurus eclipse in 16th of Taurus. You don't have to have a nodal axis in Taurus Scorpio axis, but if you have moon at 16 or 18 or 14 of Taurus, if you have, sun or Venus, you might have a ascendant and descendant axis around that degree, or your midheaven or your IC. Those sensitive points, if they're close to the eclipse, they will have impact on your life. There will be something happening within that sphere of life, midheaven, within your career, the worldly kind of look. If it's something to do with moon, it might be to do with your mother, with your internal nurturing, with your body. So pay attention to those eclipses that are happening close to something, because there's a lot. Eclipses are not the greatest energy. You know, I personally don't encourage people to go and celebrate. This is the time of introspection. This is the time when something amazing is happening in the sky, you know, and the light that gives us life, literally gives us life. Without the light of the moon and light of the sun, we wouldn't be here. It's disappearing, it's getting swallowed by the shadow, literally by the shadow. So it's not a great time to do your new moon ritual or full moon ritual. That's not what I tend to do. There are two camps of astrologers, and I belong to the one that I don't push things onto the universe during that time. I sit and listen. So my time around eclipses is more practice of self-protection, of nurturing, of listening to what universe needs to tell me. But also just to bear in mind, all those energies that we'll be talking about, they might affect a group of people, or they might affect the world at large, but not necessarily you particularly. And that doesn't mean that eclipse is not strong. It just means you don't resonate with that energy. I mean, we all spoke before this recording that we all have friends with very strong Taurian or Scorpion placements, and there's loads of stuff going on in their lives at the moment. But there are different people, like my colleague who had really strong Gemini Sagittarius. They were affected in the previous cycle. So I think I wanted to kind of clarify that as well.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And also, an eclipse in and of itself, even though it has an impact, and certainly if it's touching an important point or planet in your chart, you know, with a tight close to that same degree, it's going to be impactful. But eclipses are not standalone events, right? We have an eclipse cycle for a reason. Eclipses want to bring change into our life and into our world. And sometimes we need time to process, to think, to release, to bring in. And so there's a reason that this eclipse we're experiencing right now is part of the cycle. We had last year, November, December. We had this year, April, May. We're having now October, November. We're going to have next year in May and then October. Those are the eclipses that create one full cycle. And so this may just be one step in that process. It may be that the first eclipse was your wow moment, or maybe the last one is going to be the great aha, I need to make a change. But each one is connected in some way about supporting each other and moving us forward. Because these eclipses keep happening in the same pair of signs. They're activating the same two houses in your chart, waking us up, making us more conscious, and taking us towards whatever that change is.
There's also another type of cycle that these eclipses belong to, and I just want to mention it because many people ask me about it. What is Saros cycle? What's the number about? And this every eclipse has a number, and it belongs to a certain Saros cycle number of eclipses that has been going on for a very long time. The solar eclipse is around 1,300 years. Lunar eclipse is about cycles of 800 years. So they're very, very long cycles. And we can track these ones backwards in time and forward in time. And that might also shed some new light on what type of cycle, like this eclipse right now, it's number 136. And the last one of the same cycle was in the year 2004, and before that 1986. And so we can go back, like we do with astrology, we can go back and check out same type of patterns that has happened before, and what did they bring into your life, what did they bring into the world, and so on. So that's another way of exploring these eclipses.
That's a really good point. I forget sometimes to look up the Saros cycle, and it is really fascinating to see what that cycle energy is about, what it has been about, and how that can interconnect and repeat.
So we went eclipse, so what?
Okay. So I think we've eclipsed ourselves out.
Yeah.
Let's move into talking about some of the energy of the chart. And if y'all bear with me 1 second, I'll pull up that chart. So Monica, why don't you start us off with looking at some of the exciting energies happening in the chart. And for those who are listening, we've just pulled up the chart set at 11:01 a.m. Universal Time, Greenwich, England. We've got the moon at 16 degrees Taurus. And if you run your chart, you'll see everything else that we're about to talk about.
So one of the interesting, well, eclipse is interesting on its own, and that's a huge energy. But this chart and this few eclipses that we had, they're incredibly linked with other energies, and they pull other planetary energies into that mix of I don't want to use the word destiny because it's so overused, but it just fits that for eclipses and for eclipse energy, and why I mentioned earlier that it's tend to be my reflection time and listening to what universe wants from me instead of setting my intention what I want from the universe. This is the time of crossroads. So for me, eclipses are the times of crossroads, time of changes. And when they pull different energies from a different planet, it gets really, really interesting. And this eclipse has a Mercury cazimi, which means Mercury will be going through the heart of the sun. It's so close to the sun at the moment. It's only 8 minutes away. And it's going to be bathing or being burned, in the light of the sun, or being bathed by that greatness of the star. So normally this is a conjunction. So Mercury cazimi is effectively Mercury conjunct sun. And this is moment when those two energies blend, when Mercury is at the heart of the star that supports our solar system. So for me, this is a rebirth of communication. I think there's something about that scorpionic energy that I see two ways of going it. Whether it will be a negative expression, it will be a rebirth of the toxic lies and propaganda, which is very Scorpio. The lies that we tell, the secrets that we tell, the stories that we weave to hide other stuff that we don't want people to see. And that can be that kind of rebirth in a negative way, or again, positive expression of that energy might be, hey, we're actually burning away all that toxicity. And that communication might be sharp. It's very Scorpio, might be sharp, might be to the point, might be intense and in depth, and might be needed. So again, we're talking about that energy is happening at the south node at the moment. So there's something about clearing mentally as well, and in our communication, in our media, in the way we communicate with others, clearing that toxicity. It's a south node. It needs to be thrown away, exposed, and let go of. This is what Anne was saying earlier. We need to let go of. On the south node, we kind of are forced to let go of something. And I think there is element of letting go of those lies, letting go of those things that hold us back, and letting go of and releasing that toxicity that just sits in between when we use words as weapons, when we use words to manipulate others. So that's kind of what I see. I know that I'm very often the negative Nancy of the group. I'm trying to put the positive spin, but it is a south node in Scorpio. It's going to be tough. It's not, jumping through the meadows and singing beautiful songs. It's looking at how does my words and the way how I communicate potentially manipulate other people and the environment around me.
Yeah. And also, I think the fact that you've got Mars and Mercury in mutual reception, right? Because Mars is the traditional ruler of Scorpio, and it's positioned out there in Gemini at the moment. So there's something here we mentioned last time with that Scorpio eclipse and the way it was interacting with Mars. The phrase I remember was "actions speak louder than words," and I feel like here we see this again. There's something about if I'm truly going to release that South Node energy, it means I need to change my thinking. I need to release old ways of thinking and of speaking and of communicating. And it's not just the words that come out of my mouth, but it's those words that I tell myself that happen in the brain, that internalized self talk. And the way we're going to make the change is by walking the walk. You can't just talk the talk, you got to walk the walk. And so I am seeing here that that means facing some fear. That the take the step forward to do the thing I want to move forward means I have to face that fear I've been carrying that has maybe stopped me from taking a certain action or speaking my truth out loud or externalizing in some way all that's inside. And since it's a lunar eclipse, there's a lot inside. There's a lot of processing that needs to come out, that needs to be expressed, that needs to be given voice. The other thing too that I love is with Mercury. Mercury has its own cycle in addition to the retrograde or direct idea. There's more to it than that. When Mercury in ancient times in the Greco-Roman world, Hermes and Mercury was pretty much the only, one of the few gods that was able to be in any realm. Mercury could be in the upper world of Mount Olympus, could be in the lower world of Hades, and could be in this physical plane with us. That freedom to go between different states of consciousness. And when Mercury's retrograde, it's the psychopomp. It takes us down, it takes us into the shadowy realm and what do we need to work on. And then it appears as that morning star and it's beautiful. And when it hits that cazimi point, it disappears from view again. And so symbolically, it's like Mercury's now taking us to Mount Olympus. So if you think about what was happening in your life back at our last retrograde, which wasn't that long ago, the earlier part of September, what was going on with your thinking, with what was happening, what was inspiring you, what was that soul thought that you were bringing forward? And now's the time to take it up to the heights. Now's the time to bring it forward and say, how will I shine it? How do I put it out there? And so it can be really interesting to see the parallels between what was basically retrieved or reclaimed during the retrograde and what we're now manifesting and bringing to its highest purpose.
One thing to add with that Mars traditional ruler of Scorpio, and the modern ruler is Pluto, as Anna will tell me in a minute. But one thing with Mars and again ruling that South Node and ruling that cazimi, we've mentioned that before in our previous podcast, so I don't want to talk about it too much. But that rise of the righteous anger, that rise of the feminine. Venus is there in Scorpio, and Anne will talk us through that more. But that rise of that feminine energy and that Mercury in Scorpio, I think that burning of that energy of like, enough is enough. Like, I need to find the voice. I need to have that voice reborn. And that Mars that rules traditionally all those planets and being out of bounds, it might give us a different way of expressing that energy. It might give us out of bounds, out of the box, not standard way of expressing that and going with that. So I wouldn't be surprised seeing more and more of those pockets of, so to speak, righteous anger with the feminine, not female, but feminine energy rising there in the world and in our own lives as well.
And with Venus and Scorpio, it's intense. And also it's like when we're talking about Mars, I remember somebody writing that you can't talk about Venus without Mars or Mars without Venus, because they need to stick together somehow in the analysis. I think about Venus and Scorpio also like not being so good at expressing emotions that are very intense, that are maybe easier to show by manipulation or by trying to get other people to do like I want, or when connected to fishes, planets, Neptune, Jupiter, also maybe thinking that other people will understand what I'm saying without saying it or without communicating directly what I need and what I want and what is my desire. And when with Taurus and Scorpio, what do we need to let go? And with Scorpio, the past, also past relationships, past feelings, past behaviors of or reacting to these feelings might be something that we need to address at this time and really try to be honest about looking at and releasing and saying what works for me and where can I put the intensity of Scorpio, like in a good way, like keeping the passion alive, like having the dreams with those beautiful aspects with Neptune. And I associate Neptune, Venus also with like soulmate or the spiritual side of the relationship, when Scorpio is a lot associated with the sex and the physical side. But with Neptune, we're taking it one octave higher. Then how can I feel that together with the union that is spiritual, or the union that might be going back to many previous lifetimes, if you want to think in that way. So there's interesting possibilities also with this last very, very intense eclipse in Scorpio at Scorpio side. But now I also like that this eclipse is at the North Node. So it's more like taking us forward now. Have to leave stuff behind.
I love that Venus is in the sign of Scorpio with that South Node, but she is the ruler. She's dispositing Taurus that the North Node is in. So it's almost like there's this beautiful cycle of it's not that duality of is it what's behind me or what's in front of me? Is it past or is it future? But it's much more this cycle. And one of the things that I find happens a lot in Western astrology is we tend to think of the South Node as bad, it's old, it's been there, done that, I need to let it go. But really, it's about what have I developed? What skills do I have that I've acquired? And so with that Venus there, it's almost like, and how do I start to value the resources? Thinking about that Taurus energy. How do I value my resources that I have maybe not seen as such? How can I move forward? How can what I've learned from the past take me into the future? And so instead of it being either or, push pull, it's much more of this cyclic kind of energy nature, which to me feels more at the heart of Venus energy.
Yeah, I also like to see the South Node like a backpack with important knowledge, important things I have with me that I need to survive, really. That it's nothing I can just throw out. But if I start to collect a lot of things there, then maybe there's not room for the new things either. But it's really important to the knowledge that we have should not be wasted.
I really like that metaphor. Because like you say, you need on the road, wherever you go towards that North Node, you need that backpack. You need the stuff that you collected, the map, the flasks, something else. However, if that backpack is kitchen sink as well, it will slow you down and you're never going to get to that North Node. So it's important to release what's unnecessary and keep the stuff that are needed for that journey ahead. But again, I love that you're bringing that up, Kimberly, because we're talking about astrology. Even when we look at astrology chart, it's a round chart in the Western astrology, right? It's not linear, and that kind of South Node is bad and North Node is good kind of thinking, it's very linear, like we're moving from point A to point B. I've never personally saw astrology or cycles like that. Their cycles are coming back. They're more like a spiral that either take us up to another level or they bring us down to get deeper and deeper. But they keep coming back. And even the nodes, we know that, sorry, South Node and North Node, they will change in 9 years, they will change the position. And then in 18 years, they'll come back to the same position. So they keep returning into the same place in our charts. So yeah, I like that you brought that up. Thank you for it. And I love the metaphor of the backpack. I'll definitely be using it in the future. Stealing it, Anne.
Ditto. That is a fabulous metaphor. It sums it up perfectly.
Going back to Venus being dispositor of that North Node, Moon, and Uranus, and talking about, moving forward with the North Node, Kimberly, you wanted to take us into a realm of unexpected.
Oh yeah. So we've got this interesting T-square happening with this eclipse. So all of that beautiful Scorpio energy is opposite the moon and Taurus and the North Node. I'm sorry, the moon, Uranus, and the North Node in Taurus. Um, we've talked so much about the energy of Uranus and Taurus, but we're going to talk about it again because here it is happening on the eclipse. And you can't talk about Uranus and Taurus these days without also talking about, to the side there, Saturn in Aquarius, because they've been squaring each other. They keep doing this dance of retrograde and direct and squaring and then separating and then almost squaring and separating and coming really close. And so that tension just builds and we breathe and it builds and we breathe. So let's just kind of unpack that for a second. And for those who maybe haven't been following us, just recap what all this is about. Saturn in Aquarius has been telling us since 2020, has been really telling us and encouraging us and making us holding our feet to the fire about what does your authentic self need in this lifetime, and how are you going to build a world for yourself that allows your authentic self to come through. How are we going to change our jobs or move our homes, or how do we structure, whether it's on a personal level, whether it's in our society, in our governments, but what is the structure that allows us to move forward? And not only that, but if we feel stuck in the past someplace, how are we also going to move forward and be that embracing that futuristic energy of Aquarius? So that's just been there bombarding all of us. And we've been talking about that for 2 years now. And then back in 2018, I think it was when Uranus first entered Taurus. So this again is not a new energy. We've been dealing with this energy for a while about it is time for change. It is time for us to change. And since Uranus is all about change and the unexpected and the future and moving forward, it's in this lovely sign of Taurus. It says, but there is something I don't want to let go of. Change would be great if I could have change and keep what I've had. If that backpack I could just convert into a RV and fill it up and take everything with me, it would be fine. There wouldn't be this emotional dilemma, but that's not the case, right? The case is that change requires I let go, that I release, whether I'm releasing something of the past or whether I'm releasing what I'm afraid of. And now we've been in this about halfway through this cycle of these eclipses in Scorpio Taurus, which just, to me, it's like creating the perfect soup. We've been putting ingredients in and letting it simmer and putting ingredients in. And now these eclipses are just stirring that pot of what is it that scares you to your bones about this idea of moving forward? And what is it you need to let go of, but not having it? Is that your safety net that we don't want to let go of? Is it the, if I move forward, the other shoe might fall? What is that fear? What is that boogeyman in the closet kind of, whether it's irrational or whether it's based on past experience? What is that fear that's there? So, and I'm really trying to like just sum up several episodes, several hours of what we've talked about, but that would be sort of the soup that we're in. And so now here we see it one more time, rising to a bubble, toil, toil, cauldron burn, cauldron bubble. I'm totally butchering Shakespeare, but you know what I mean. The Macbeth sisters, like we have this energy arising, coming up to say, what does it feel like to change? What feels good? Because this is a lunar eclipse. Never mind the what I think I can do, what I'm afraid I can't do, how long it's going to take to build those structures. Let's just put that aside for a moment and let's get in touch with how it will feel to be that future self, to be in that future place, to build that future life. What will it feel like if I take one step towards it? I'm a little bit closer to it now. Okay, that's my happy Pollyanna view of looking at this. The other side of the coin is this is a T-square, which means it's tension. It is all of these ingredients have come together And now we really feel that push, pull, that tension. I want to restructure my life. I want to make a major change, but this could happen, that could happen. And if you start to look at your natal chart and see where your Aquarius, your Taurus, and your Scorpio are at odds, it will probably illuminate for you what are the areas of life. Are you feeling it in job, in home, in family, wherever else? Yeah, that's my take on the beautiful soup that is brewing here with this T square. What do you guys think about all that Uranus and Saturnian energy on the eclipse?
Well, it's kind of like an eclipse on, I don't even know what to say, on like time 1000, because we have an eclipse. So we have moon close to the north node and moon being eclipsed. And we have so that's already an energy of unknown, so to speak, the gods are taking over, the dragon is swallowing our moon. There's something happening in nature that is kind of foreboding, if I can use that word here, right? And then we have on top of that the energy of like unexpected. Look over there. Like it's just something. It's that energy. Kimberly, you keep bringing that up for Uranus, and I quite like that energy of the tower from Tarot, that lightning rod that kind of comes down from heaven unexpected. You didn't see it coming, you didn't plan it, you couldn't predict it, and it breaks down all the foundations and stuff that you've built, and all the walls and kind of safety nets as well. And most of astrologers will say that the one thing that you can predict with Uranus is that there will be something unpredictable. So if you're expecting a big event, probably it will be very quiet. If you expect that it will be very quiet, the world will just flip upside down. So there will be something that you will not expect. So that's something that is making me personally a bit nervous around that eclipse. But also I was thinking what you were saying about that energy of letting go and the new and the fears, and especially the fears around the Taurian energy. And what I've been noticing over the last few days and couple of weeks is that there's quite a lot of people around me in my environment, my family as well, who are being faced with unexpected events that shake them to their core. It's that kind of internal Uranus. It doesn't have to be, lightning coming and burning my house down, but that moment where you realize that your child is mortal and actually your child had an accident. And as a parent, there's nothing worse, I think, to kind of be shook like this. Or you have this amazing, job that you enjoy and whatnot, and suddenly you find out, actually, we're really sorry, but we're making your position redundant and you have to go and look for something else. And that stability, that safety, that financial security is being taken away from you. And there's a lot of that going on. Anything that you think of Taurian, you have a safe and secure home, and suddenly someone breaks into that. How do you cope with that? Even if nothing happened or nothing has been stolen, but that kind of fear of that safety and that tower that I built is not safe anymore. Or, I don't know, boiler breaks down in a house and house gets flooded with water. And again, your safety kind of blanket that you accumulated, or that hoarding of these things in your space, it's suddenly taken away from you. And what does that uncover? How do you cope with that? I mean, those energies coming and helping you to do, some uncovering. Like, how do you cope with that? Are you going into shutdown mode? Very kind of Scorpionic as well. You're pulling back into that south node. You're going into Scorpio, into despair and destruction and freeze mode. Very kind of iceberg. Or are you trying to plow forward with rethinking of your values and the rethinking of, what does that really mean to me? Have I valued that thing a lot? Okay, my job, has been lost for me, but actually, is it a great opportunity to look for something else? Is it a natural end to a cycle? Again, we're talking about astrology. Those are in cycles, right? Is it a natural end for me to move on to another contract, to another role? Maybe if I stayed in this role and I didn't have that kind of push from universe, I would be in this role for another 2, 3, 5, 10 years. But now that it came in, hey, maybe there's an opportunity for me to have another adventure, build something Taurian, build something beautiful and of value. You know, if I realize that, hey, you know, something happened to my health, my body, you know, again, Taurus is the body. Am I taking enough care of my body? Am I taking, you know, and am I nurturing of myself, or is it something that I do on the back end? And that Saturn that in Aquarius, like you say, that tension that's been there for quite some time. This is the tension that's we've been dealing with for the last 2 years. For the last 2 years. This is the tension that's given us given us that kind of constriction where we literally were told to sit at home and wear a mask and be constrained and not allowed to do things, again depending on a country or state, if you're in US, and that freedom, Uranus, and different way of thinking that push people forward. Some people that I know or I've heard of lost their jobs because they were in, you know, travel industry or hospitality industry or movie industry, for example. And suddenly they actually started, you know, playing with their hobby, and that hobby turned into amazing business. You know, how many new businesses that pandemic created? I mean, it killed a lot of businesses as well. You know, I'm not trying to kind of make it sound like it's all great and rosy. It really did a lot of damage as well, but it also allowed some people to thrive because they had that opportunity to turn their hobby into business. And that baking that they were doing for friends, now it's a full-time job on Instagram. So this is the kind of energy that coming through again. At the end, this cycle is closing. Like Kimberly said, we'll have one in May next year and another one in October next year, but that will be in between Libra and Aries eclipses. So this cycle is already finishing. So what is it about this November 8th that will push you out of your comfort zone, that will be that lightning rod in your mind? What can I do to move forward, to release the toxicity and leave the toxic relationships, toxic thinking, and all that kind of poison behind me, and move forward to create and build something that is sustainable, beautiful, and worth my time and my effort. Sorry, I just went on a little bit of a rant
like
there.
it. And I want to follow up with what you said about, you know, that tower card kind of analogy. In tarot, I believe, if I remember correctly, the tower card is followed by the star. And the way I always thought about it is if you were in a building and the fire alarm goes off, get out of the building. Don't stay there. You know, if there's tornadoes coming, go to the tornado shelter. Don't stay there. The reason the tower card can be difficult is because we stay. We're trying to save whatever's falling. Everything's falling on top of me. But if we leave, then what follows is, okay, yes, there was some destruction, but now what am I going to build with it? How can I take from that rubble the pieces that are still valid and build something new and aspire to maybe something I hadn't seen before, and allow my creativity to move me towards that star energy? And I feel like that's what Saturn's really asking of us is, yes, to build a new life is hard. To allow our authentic self to have a voice, it is difficult when we've been told since before we could walk, no, that's not acceptable in some way, shape, or form, right? We all get these messages that parts of us are accepted and parts of us are not. And so with that Aquarian energy of Saturn, it's like the parts of us that maybe feel like they don't fit the mold, or they don't fit the family, or they don't fit society. Those are the parts saying we need to have voice too. And if we look at the energies here, it just makes sense that we've got Scorpio and Taurus. So if we are caught up in the eclipse energy and we're very unconscious and not working it, then perhaps some of the dysfunctions of these two signs are coming forward. We may be experiencing changes in our financial situation, with debt, with money, with hoarding, with trying to accumulate too much, with holding on, that negative side of the Taurus pendulum. maybe we are reacting from a place of fear from that Scorpio side, or we being the Scorpion who's retreating under the rock or stinging people because we sense an attack, whether or not it's real. If we can see, hey, this is actually a call to change, and change can be frightening. And if we work with that and embrace that, getting outside of the comfort zone, even though it's scary, right? Then we can bring in the positive sides, right? We can create money in new ways. We can see that, something wonderful is going to rise from the ashes of that firebird of Scorpio. So it's not easy. It's intense, as we've been saying. It's intense for a reason, because this is transformation, requires true change on a very fundamental level in our thinking and in our actions. And so this is what I see when I look at this chart that's happening right now. It's kind of beautiful, even though it scares me.
Uranus can be really, really anxious, but it can also make you feel very much alive.
Monica, not to put you on the spot, but I'm going to anyway. Didn't you share with us in our last informal chat we were doing, the three of us? Didn't you share some info that you had perspective you had learned about Uranus? I think it was some of the evolutionary astrology perspective about it that was a little different. You're muted.
I'm not sure which one you're referring to.
Dang it, I can't do it justice now, but it had to do with things that we often associate with Pluto as being a little more Uranian. Trauma signatures that have to do with Uranus.
Okay, so if I remember correctly, I think when we're talking about Uranus, so Uranus is perceived as a higher octave of Mercury, but also in evolutionary astrology, one way of looking at Uranus is this is a trauma. And again, there can be different signatures. It's not just Uranus in your chart means trauma, but Uranus energy can be that trauma that freezes us in place. It's like the lightning rod. We saw an accident, and that kind of moment, we froze in that moment. And it could have been as, like just witnessing some kind of accident or incredible event, and we froze at that moment. And that moment, that kind of split or a crack in our psyche that happened, that's there. It's like a lightning that kind of splits something in our psyche, and then 20 years later something happened, and we again into that frozen moment from the past. So Uranus can be that kind of trauma. Yeah, that moment where you're 40 or 50-year-old and someone, I don't know, there is a shot behind you because the car backfired, but you witness as a 12-year-old child, someone being shot, and suddenly you're being brought back into that. So this is the moment of that frozen trauma that can actually be there for generations, that can actually be linked to your previous lives. But also what I love about Uranus, and I completely forgot up until you actually brought it out, and I don't think we actually talked about that previously. Uranus is also considered a karma breaker. So a significant transit of Uranus is the opportunity to break your karma. So if there is a significant transit of Uranus in your own chart, Uranus is going through and touching a sensitive point in your chart, this is the moment to release that energy. So if there is an energy linked to that South Node in your chart, or that Mars in your chart, or that IC in your chart, and Uranus is transiting through it, it's not just about shaking that tower, but also helping you see that you can leave that tower. It's like Kimberly says, there is a lightning coming for it. You can actually leave that all behind and that rubble, and not just be with it. So Uranian transit can bring that release. But like with everything, again, with those cycles, we need to consciously work with that. It's like one astrologer says, you can't expect breaking a karma if you're just sitting there, watching Netflix and doing nothing. But if you are, working on your personal development, if you're working with your fears, with your trauma, with your transitions, and you're actively trying, the Uranus can take you, a few steps ahead, because it's this moment that kind of gives you that extra boost.
Thank
So
you.
having it on that eclipse might be significant for us, not just internally and personally, but it might bring those changes or those significant breakthroughs. Again, another very Uranian word, breakthroughs, for us as a collective, I think.
Yeah, and I think that applies right now because so
Mm.
many people that I know are doing cord cutting or releasing old thinking patterns that have been hard to release and coming to that realization it's not just mine, it's multi-generational that I've inherited. I'm sorry, I think you were going to say something, Anne, I cut you off. Sorry.
No, I just said I thought it was interesting way of doing a Uranus.
Yeah.
I thought so.
And then our last, so much to look at in this chart, but the last thing we identified to look at was what's going on with Jupiter and Neptune hanging out in the latter degrees of Pisces. They are making a square to that lovely Mars, and they're making a trine to Venus. So I'm gonna rip open the what's going on with Mars. Um, and it's not the first time that we've experienced Jupiter at the tail end of Pisces. I think Monica, you were looking up the dates of this retrograde pattern.
Yes. So the Jupiter went originally into Pisces. Left Pisces originally. It was at 29 before it moved to Aries on 10th of May. Now Jupiter retrograded back into Pisces. And it's again at 29 degrees, and it will go forward again on 21st of December, depending on where you are in the world this year. So again, we have that hit to that anaretic degree 3 times. May this year, now at the eclipse time, and then again on the 21st of December, which is like Kimberly mentioned earlier, it's a winter solstice. So it's interesting in itself, that journey of Jupiter and being close to one of the eclipses, because we had eclipse at the end of April, on the 30th of April, and I don't remember what was the other one. And Jupiter was at the time 29th of Pisces, close to that eclipse, and then another eclipse coming in, and Jupiter is again at 29 of Pisces. So so there is something about that last degree of Piscean energy that it's expanding, and yet it's coming to an end.
Yeah, that 29 degrees is such a important end of a cycle. And we talked last time, 2 weeks ago, we talked about Jupiter being at the 0 Aries point. So here we're seeing like the end of a cycle, the beginning of a cycle, and all that energy that we need to expand. And I think that for me, when Jupiter is in Pisces, it's sort of going back to what was my vision? When we were confined, I had a vision. Back before everything became go, 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 there was a period of stillness, and I had a vision. And there was a lot of talk that the three of us were doing about vision boards. I think this is sort of that call from the universe to remember that you are the architect, go back to the vision. And are we making that vision our reality? Or have we gotten caught up with the needs, the of reality, that we've forgotten about the vision? By the same token, the other side of that pendulum is getting caught up in fantasy. So this can also be a time of great disappointment and disillusionment that I stepped forward. I might be one of those people that I was part of the great resignation movement. I left my job and I've moved forward, and things aren't taken off the way I wanted them to. Things aren't happening according to plan. And so we can feel both that pressure to reconnect in some way with our vision, but also this sadness that reality doesn't match up to the fantasy. And I think the pressure with Mars is I want it now. That's one of the huge things. It isn't about, I don't want to be that Saturn architect that plans something that's going to take me another 8 years. It has been tough. It has been rough. I want it now. And that impatience. And what can happen, I think, is that our drive and our passion can ebb and flow. It can start to feel like I have so much passion. I'm going to start anew. Okay, now it's gone. The sail has gone out from under my wings, kind of thing, and now I want it back. Especially since we're dealing with a Mars that's currently retrograde. And one of the things I've always found is when Mars goes retrograde, so too does my physical vitality go. I want to sit on the couch and make a couch fortress and hide from the world until it comes direct again. So there can be this ebb and flow of that Piscean energy rubbing against the Mars, but we need to do something now. And so perhaps it isn't about building the huge dream, the final chapter, making it real today. Maybe it's about taking the next step towards that dream, because there's always something I can do now to move me towards it. And since Mars is in this out of bounds place, and it is in the sign of Gemini, perhaps what I can do is think about how I communicate that vision in a way that's different from how I've communicated it before. Do it differently and see what happens. I think that's some of the tension, but also some of the gift that we have.
Yeah, I'll say, Kimberly, I think I'm ready. I'm all tucked out about this eclipse, and I think it's ready. I'm ready to share my tips, if that's okay with both of you. So I'll start with my tips, and my tips will be around eclipses again. So there's so much that we shared with you today in this episode. Think about what would be great for you to journal on. But going back to what I was saying originally about the eclipse, for me personally, this is the time of the crossroad. This is the time where we are at the nexus point, and there's this kind of path that we were going with, and the universe opening a different path for us. So there's always this kind of moment of opening something else. And if we take a step back and actually listen, we can actually listen to what universe is bringing up for us to see and work through. And one of the good ways of fun ways for us to do that is look at the cycle across the years and see what themes were coming up. So this cycle obviously started last year, will end next year. The previous one was 2012, 2013, 2014. So started end of 2012 through 2013, and then finished in 2014. And the one before, again, end of 2002, 2003, and 2004. So we have the 9-year cycle before that, when the South Node was in Taurus and the North Node was in Scorpio. So that was the reverse nodal axis. And then 18 years ago, when we had similar situation around 2002, 2003, 2004, with the South Node in Scorpio and the North Node in Taurus. So 2 things that I always recommend. 1, look at those years and see what was important. What was the theme? If you were to write a movie about your life, what episode would be, covering those 2 years? Was it the episode about relationships? Was it that you were moving around this time? Was it about work? And the good thing actually about how to find the areas of life where that might be coming through, it's looking at your chart and there's plenty of free material out there where you can, and a website where you can run your chart for free and look at the house where that eclipse is happening. So is it happening in your 5th house, or is it happening in your 9th house? And that will also give you an idea of what areas of life were affected. So I would be really curious to hear some stories. We 3 shared some stories already between us. Share that story with us. Have a look, journal on that, and have a reflection on how this cycle that happened already, 9 years ago and 18 years ago, how that cycle reemerges again in your life, and what can you do different?
Great. Great advice. I'm just going to throw out there that I'm really fixated lately on the Mars and its journey and what that's doing in my world. So I think on this particular eclipse, I am going to be thinking about opening myself to receiving inspiration from the universe, finding within myself, how can I use my voice in a way that's different? How can I give voice to my thoughts, to my feelings, to whatever it is, my passions, my anger? Pick a Mars topic. How can I do a expressing my words differently? And then noticing what are the feelings in my body that come from that? Does that trigger excitement? Do I lean in and move towards it? Does it bring up fear? Do I shut down? Do I go into shallow breathing? Is this something that I am open to exploring, or is this something that perhaps I'm embracing too much resistance? And that might be just that first step of how we can start playing with this and being open to the surprises of this Mars energy, because it will be retrograde for a while and then it will be out of bounds until we see our next eclipse in Scorpio. So it's not going away. It's a good time to take a first step into those waters.
Yeah, I was experiencing interesting happening here when my lamp just fell down, but that's just eclipse season. So now I would like, Monica was talking about cycles, but I would like you to go out and check out your personal Saros cycle. So the cycle of the eclipse before you were born, which number was that? And you can know that by checking out which eclipse was closest to your birthday. And then follow it the years it's been active again and check out those years in your life. Has something special happened to you there? Have you seen some kind of changes, or does that year ring a bell somehow? That's my tip for this week.
I love it. And if you're willing, put it in the comments. I'd be really curious to hear people's experiences about which cycles, which Saros cycles, they can really connect with. And on that note, thanks for joining us, for sitting in, for having your cup of tea or coffee or beverage of your choice, and making some time to look at this eclipse energy and discuss eclipse season with us. We'll see you again in 2 weeks' time.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us in this week's Astro Chat. We hope that you enjoyed the discussion and would love to hear about anything that resonated with you. Keep the conversation going by posting shareable content on our Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube pages. You can also email us at astrochatpodcast@gmail.com. AstroChat is uploaded every 2 weeks on the Saturday before each new and full moon. Look for us on your favorite podcast platform as well as on YouTube. You can support AstroChat and receive exclusive content by donating on our Patreon page. We look forward to chatting with you all again at the next lunation of the moon.